Hi, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're joining from, or hello if you are joining via recording after the fact. It's wonderful to know that you're there, and wonderful to be here for the third episode of my mini-series on how to have a good day in uncertain times. The first week, we spent time on conscious attention and where to put it, and how that could break a negative spiral in our thinking surprisingly easily. Last week we talked about amplifying certainties to help us cope better with certainty, and today we're going to talk about self-compassion. I think that self-compassion is a topic that you might have seen a little bit about in the press over the last few months, and I don't think a year ago that would have been so much the case. I think it's become something that we've been talking about a lot more. And I think there's a very good reason for that. When we think about compassion, we usually think about compassion towards other people. We always think about sort of kindness towards others. But of course, we're each going through challenging times and uncertain times. And it's important to think about kindness towards ourselves. And I want to explain why that is today, because it might be something that you read and you think, oh, that's, sounds like a nice to have. I want to make the scientific case for kindness and compassion towards ourselves. And I also want to talk about very practically what that means, because it doesn't necessarily mean giving yourself a pamper day or whatever is your particular version of being nice to yourself or me time. I'm actually going to talk, as is what I usually do, I'm going to talk about very specific practical things you can do in the heat of the moment if something is challenging you, is stressing you. What is it you can do within a second to get yourself back centered and steady? So that's what I'm going to talk about today. Wonderful to see everybody here. I'm just going to say hello to a few people. Hi, Pambos from Cyprus. Hi, Sylvia in New York. Hi, Edie in London. Hi, Jane from Hertfordshire. Hi, Martin in Ann Arbor. Wonderful. Jane, Burbage, fantastic. Wonderful to see you all. Danielle in Sittingbourne, and hello, Margaret in Washington. It's a great day, great way to start your day. Thank you so much. Well, thank you for starting it with me. Wonderful. So, self-compassion. What is the scientific case for self-compassion? And does that even make sense? Isn't that, maybe just a kind of state of mind? Is there a real business case even to be made for self-compassion? Well, yes, I'm going to suggest that actually self-compassion not only helps boost our resilience, but actually helps us perform better and think better in when we're facing challenging situations. So why do we need self-compassion in the first place? I mean, we need it because we're not perfect, right? We're obviously fantastically capable human beings, but there are times when we are at our best, and there are times when we are not so much at our best. And we have days when we are firing on all cylinders and days when we're not. If there are times when you have perhaps been a bit grumpy or a bit demotivated in the last few months, or if you've perhaps sent an email that was a bit spiky or received one that was a bit spiky, you're not alone. This is happening all around us. It's never hard for me to think about my own examples. If I think back, just over the last week, and this, it's a little embarrassing to admit these things, but, I want to put some skin in the game. So, Nathan, who some of you just heard there, received 4 emails from me in quick succession as I was live processing something that I thought really needed to be done urgently. Was that me at my best? No, that was not me at my best. That was 24 hours ago. Yesterday, I was driving and there was a guy who cut me off, and I was really annoyed, and in a way that obviously didn't make any real sense. And then I was shamefully pleased when he was then cut off by someone else. This is not me at my best. And last week, actually, when I was doing this broadcast with you, I've got a really clear intention to try and keep these broadcasts shorter than half an hour, so that you can kind of get on to your next thing at 30 minutes past the hour. And I ran over by a couple of minutes, so sometimes we're not able to do exactly what we want, do exactly what we hope. Now, there's a really good reason for that, and some of you will know some about this. The reason is that we have a brain that is constantly searching the environment around us for things that feel rewarding, that give us a sense of self-esteem and that motivate us to keep going. And the sorts of things we're talking about are sometimes internal, sometimes they're about our sense of competence and our sense of control, our sense of autonomy. Sometimes they're feeling purposeful, that there's a point to what we're doing. And sometimes they're external. They're perhaps feeling fairly treated, feeling included, feeling respected, those sorts of things. Now, these things are rewards for the brain. But the trouble is that in any case where we perceive that there's a possibility that any of these are being undermined, our brain registers that as a threat. And it doesn't really matter whether it's for real or not, because our brain is mounting this defensive response in order to keep us safe. And as you would hope from a system that's designed to keep us safe, it's quite sensitive and it'll look out for anything that could be a potential threat to your feeling of competence and control. It's going to look out for a potential threat to your feelings of being treated fairly or respectfully. And so there's this response to anything around you that might undermine your sense of self-esteem. And it's a defensive response, and it's one that you've probably heard of called fight, flight, or freeze. And it's a very rapid, instinctive response to keep us safe. And of course, in the workplace, fight, flight, or freeze does not typically look like actually, say, punching someone. It usually is something a little bit more behavioral. It's something a little bit more about perhaps making a snappy comment or a knee-jerk reaction, like sending 4 emails when you suddenly think that something urgently needs to be done. Or, perhaps it's being unresponsive. Perhaps it's sort of putting your head down and kind of hoping that everything passes by if you just freeze and keep still. So this is going on for us all the time, anytime we perceive anything that might be a threat to our competence, autonomy, purpose, fairness, inclusion, respect. And the thing is, it's not just a behavioral hit. It doesn't just affect our behavior, it also affects our intelligence. And there is interesting research that actually shows this on a brain scan. You can see that when any of these mild stressors are in our environment, what happens is that there's less activity in the part of the brain that is sophisticated, the prefrontal cortex, that's responsible for reasoning and self-control and planning and all of that really clever, thoughtful stuff. And why is that? It's because it takes some energy to power up the defensive response, the defensive fight, flight, freeze response. And your brain doesn't have infinite energy, so it has to compensate somewhere and reduce the energy elsewhere. And so that's what comes as a result. We lose some of our functionality, we lose some of our intelligence. And now it starts to make a little bit more sense why we might not always be at our best, because if you think about all of the things that are around us right now, all of the things that might challenge our feelings of being competent and control in particular, then of course we're going to be in a situation where we're going to be perhaps just slightly on the defensive and then just slightly impaired, both not quite as nice or well-mannered or as careful and thoughtful and expansive and generous in our thinking, but also not as sharp and not making as good choices. So that's the background. An additional piece here is that if we are short of sleep or tired or we're lacking a sense of security, all of that response, that threat response, gets turned up. And you can see this, again, in studies where people have been made to go short of sleep. They're more reactive to the sorts of things that would be perceived as mildly stressful by other people. You can actually see their brain going more on the defensive. You can see a stronger stress response. So that's the backdrop. What does it mean that we should do? What does science say that we should actually do about our response to that? Well, I think a lot of hardworking professionals respond by, we beat ourselves up a little bit. We say, oh, I shouldn't have done that. Oh, why did I do that? Oh, we get a little disappointed with ourselves. And this is the thing I really want you to remember. The thing is that if you go to a place of self-criticism first, when you notice that you've not done something perfectly, what's going to happen is that that's actually going to undermine your feeling of competence even further and your feeling of self-respect. And so what that means is the hit to self-esteem gets larger. And given what we've just learned, that actually makes it harder to be at our best because that pushes us even more on the defensive. So that's the scientific case for taking a different approach. I'm not saying that you shouldn't have high aspirations and really try to do your best and improve and, fix whatever it is that perhaps didn't go perfectly. But I am saying that what you don't want to do is start with self-criticism. You actually want to start with a response that feels more compassionate, a sliver of kindness and understanding to yourself in that moment. And there are really practical ways of doing this. I have a little way of remembering how to do this for myself, which is using the A's here, is acknowledge what might be going on in my thoughts, my feelings, my behavior, just to notice it and to mention it to myself and label it in my mind, to ask what could be causing that, given everything I know about things that might challenge my sense of self-esteem. What do I think might have pushed my buttons? Or am I just underslept? Am I just tired? Am I just worried about something? And then appreciate, is there something I can say that I can at least appreciate about whatever it is that I've brought to the table, some attitude or process or small win perhaps. And that doesn't take as long as it sounds, because you might be saying, well, yes, but if you're in the middle of something, how can you really sort of take a big sidestep and say, okay, now I acknowledge, I ask, I appreciate, to reduce the state of alert in my brain so that I can think more clearly? Because that's really what we're trying to do. We're trying to reduce the state of alert in our brain so we can think more clearly and make better choices. But the thing is, it doesn't actually take very long. It doesn't take very long for a couple of reasons. One is that actually studies suggest that doing any one of these three reduces the state of alert in our brain and gets us off the defensive somewhat so that we can think more clearly and reboot our intelligence. Any one of these three has that effect. But let me give you an example of how quickly you can do it. So I mentioned that last week I had run a little longer than I meant to. Not a lot, but still I had set an intention. And for those of you who subscribe to my emails, you'll know I said that it would be sort of around 25 minutes, and certainly between 25 and 30, and it was 32 minutes. And I could see the time ticking away. And what was happening was I was being a little bit more verbose, a little bit more chatty, long-winded, I suppose, in saying what I was saying. And so I acknowledged that. I noticed that. After about 15 minutes, I thought, okay, I notice that I'm running a little longer. I'm taking a little longer to say some of the same things that I would normally say in a brisker, tighter, sharper way. Interesting. Okay. I wonder what could be causing that. Well, possibly a feeling of not being completely in control, because you might remember that, we just come from a difficult hospital visit for my mum and not feeling that, things were completely settled. So there's definitely a feeling of perhaps competence and autonomy being a little challenged, and then also just tiredness. And then, okay, well, I at least appreciate the fact that I'm here and actually I'm having a really good time. And I'm going to trust that I'm going to be able to pick up the pace so I can wrap this up in a good, timely manner. And what that meant in reality was, I notice I'm running long. I think that's because I'm a bit tired. Okay, well, at least I'm here and I'm having a good time, and I hope that I can pick up the pace. That's it. And then with that, I was able to carry on, stay focused, stay fully present, and have a wonderful time with you guys. But if I'd gone to that moment, if I'd gone to that place of self-criticism and said, oh my God, I'm running really late. Oh no, I have to kind of go faster. What would have happened? I mean, it's sort of obvious when I spell it out like that. Obviously what would have happened is beating myself up would have put me more on the defensive, would have made me less sharp, because it would have reduced activity in my prefrontal cortex. I would have been distracted. I would have been then worrying. And then you would have had probably a less Caroline version of Caroline. And that's the thing. We're trying to be at our best as much as possible, remove the defensive barriers to being at our best as much as possible. So that's what I would say, is not to say don't hold yourself to high standards. But when you notice yourself not being absolutely at your best, go to a place of self-compassion, acknowledge, ask, appreciate, and then think about what to do next. So let me pause there. I'm going to be curious to know what resonates with you. out of all of this. Let me hear what you have to say. I'm going to put a little question on the screen. What thoughts and questions do you have as you listen to this? And I will say, while you're thinking about that, and while you're perhaps making some comments in the comment box, I will say that, you know, this is also essentially the recipe for compassionate leadership. I mean, you might also have heard references to compassionate leadership being more and more prominent, and I'm so glad to see that. And you might also have said, well, but what does that mean in practice? You know, because as a leader, as a manager, you still want to hold people to high standards, and you still want to develop them and stretch them and so forth. So what does it mean to be compassionate? Does it mean just being soft? And the answer is no, it doesn't. Any more than taking a compassionate approach to yourself means being soft on yourself. What we're talking about here is just doing the mental preparation that notices perhaps that someone on your team is falling a little short, you know, maybe hasn't done something you hoped. And then in your mind to say, okay, I acknowledge that perhaps you know, they haven't done what was expected. Maybe, you know, this person didn't reply to an email and then didn't reply to another email. Okay, I wonder what could be causing that. I wonder what could be, you know, causing them either to be on the defensive or just to be distracted. I wonder what might be driving that. Okay, well, it could be anything. It could be competence, autonomy, purpose, fairness, inclusion, respect. I mean, you know, fairness is actually quite a big one. That's why I was so annoyed about the guy cutting me off in the car. So fairness, inclusion, respect, competence, autonomy, purpose, these things are really, really important triggers. What could be going on with them? And then say, okay, well, I can at least appreciate that they're doing this well, or that they're bringing this attitude or this focus to this particular part of the project. And then if you do that in your mind, and again, it can take 30 seconds, and then have the conversation with them, now you're in a very different state of mind. You're less on the defensive, and you're going to be able to have a better, more compassionate, leader-like conversation with them. So let's have a look so I'm going to throw some comments onto the screen, see what people are saying. Sylvia is saying, apologizing for me is the key. To me, first of all, and also to others I might have hurt. Then I can restart with a blank sheet. Yeah, so I think that is a really nice way of thinking about the first of the three. I said acknowledge, ask, and appreciate. I think acknowledgement, you know, just is so powerful. It's so much more powerful than I think a lot of us give credit for. And what we're looking for when we're hoping that someone might apologize to us is, of course, that acknowledgement that there has been some kind of hurt. And I love the way that, Sylvia, you're saying this to yourself and saying, okay, poor you, let me look after yourself. Let me look after myself a little bit better. I really like that. And as I mentioned, any one of these three, acknowledge, ask, and appreciate, has been shown to reduce the sense of alert in our brains. So I love that that's working for you. It helps you think clearly and restart with a blank sheet. It's absolutely what studies suggest. Now let's have a look. Let's see what else people are saying. Simon Woodhouse. As everyone knows, it's handy to gather before we start anything, get in the right state, breathing, etc. Absolutely, to head off the chance of an emotional response before it might occur. Absolutely, and your point, Simon, about constant checking in with yourself being a practice, I think that's very true. And it is something that you can get extra practice in doing by doing it when you're in conversations with people too. So to get into the habit of doing the acknowledge, ask, and appreciate routine, even in the heat of the moment with, you know, in the middle of a meeting. So perhaps someone is frowning a lot in a conversation. You might say, oh, Simon, I noticed you were frowning. Tell me what's on your mind. I mean, you don't have to do all three all the time, but just the fact of acknowledging, noticing, and asking is a compassionate response, rather than sitting there and fuming because you're seeing someone who's fuming at you. So I think that's a really good point. It does take practice, and it does get easier quite quickly. Let's see, what else have we got here? Edie, I'd love to know how you're able to acknowledge, ask, appreciate while you were presenting / reading questions? Well, you know, it's back to Simon's point about practice, actually. This all does come easier if you do it more often. And I definitely can remember times in my career, you know, when I was 20 years ago, if something went wrong in a presentation, I did what, you know, you would expect. I sort of freaked out a little bit. But over the years, you know, I've seen so many things that haven't gone exactly right. And you know, actually the world hasn't ended. So there's a little bit of just kind of perspective that I think helps. I think also it helps for me when I'm thinking about, you know, doing this in the middle of a presentation. I think about the humanity of the people I'm talking to, which means, you know, you guys. I feel really clear that my intention is to create a good experience. And actually, if I can stay focused on that intention, then that's what helps me in the moment be able to kind of maintain the right mindset. So that's a little bit back to the things we talked about in the first week about the power of deciding what you want to notice. I hope that helps. But practice is probably central to it, I'll be honest. What else have we got? LinkedIn user. Living in the 21st century means there are a million ways to connect and they all break. Oh, yes. So, you know, we started the session today and we got a message from LinkedIn saying that we weren't live, even though, you know, we thought we were. Last week, I forgot to put my microphone on right at the beginning. Yeah. And I think you just have to be, you have to have that perspective and that sense of humanity about it, and, you know, recognize that if you go into it with the right intentions and you go into it with that desire to acknowledge, ask, and appreciate, that people will pick up your good intentions. That's great. Let's see if there's are there any other comments? Oh yes, let's have a look. How aligned, Robert Thompson is asking, how aligned is acknowledge, ask, and appreciate to Paul Gilbert's compassion-focused therapy? I think it's, yeah, I mean, I think that there is actually quite a lot of writing about compassion that is out there. And I think it's really now coming much more into the, you know, the social consciousness, that this isn't just something that is a soft approach, but to, you know, to actually, you know, something that we can all use every single day. So yes, and the science underpinning this is really sort of fundamental. It applies to all human beings. The fact that, you know, if we beat ourselves up, we're putting ourselves more on the defensive. We're making it harder for us to behave well and think clearly. So, you know, that's at the heart of that's really at the heart of all of this. Okay, I'm going to, oh, there's one more comment I'm going to throw up on the screen. I've been procrastinating over an important project, says Danielle. I've made a commitment, but other people I'd need to network with are really high-powered, intelligent people, and it's unnerving. How do I make myself just get on with it? Well, that's a broader question. That's a broader question. I mean, I think, again, there are techniques actually about how to deal with procrastination that I've written about. There was a Harvard Business Review article about procrastination that I wrote that you might want to dig out, which is, if I were to pick out one thing from that, it is to reduce the size of the cost to getting started by picking out one teeny tiny little bit of the task so that you can bite off that and feel good about achieving that. It boosts your sense of competence and then you feel more motivated to carry on. But maybe there's some kindness and compassion you need to show to yourself first. Maybe there is something here about you know, acknowledging your feelings of nervousness and being kind to yourself about that. To help you get off the starting blocks. All right. Well, so thank you, everybody. I'm going to make good on my commitment to finish before 1:30, and I hope that has been useful for you. I look forward to hearing all of your comments via email or on the website. Thank you so much.